Hello and welcome to the We All Follow podcast. My name is Matt Fox. I'm your host. Today, after a long-awaited absence, Dobbo is back. How you doing, buddy?
I'm doing good. It's good to be back. It has been, I don't even know how long it's been since I was last on. So it's
It's been
yeah,
it's been a while.
it's been
I'm
it's been at least a
I
month.
promise I'm not getting jealous of FK. You know, we're all good. It's all good, man.
To be fair,
You,
I've only been on late night latte once as well for like a
I
good
know.
month, 2 months. So it's been good. It's been busy, but it's good to be back, and hopefully I can get back on a bit more.
It's good to have you back. Sean, how's it going, buddy? After your sortie to Florida, you're on mute.
Yeah,
I'll unmute you.
there you go.
Go ahead.
It's not it's not Florida, but it's pretty it's all right here,
It'll have to do for
Yeah.
now.
Yes. It's not Hawaii, it's not Florida, but it'll do for now. As long as it doesn't snow.
It'll do. All right, let's jump right into it. Follow us on X at We All Follow Pod. Like, comment your moment of the week in the comments. Send this pod to a friend. Give them an early Christmas gift. You know, like you should be giving them good stuff. It doesn't have to be expensive. It has to be of quality, like this podcast. So send it to a friend and join us. All right. Moment of the week, Dobbo. What do you got for me, buddy?
Oh, we're going Premier League or we're going Champions League?
It can be wherever you want, my friend.
Oh, that is a tough one. I think for me, I'm actually going to have to probably say Chelsea beating Spurs. And it wasn't. I don't think they just beat them. I think they beat them quite resoundingly. I think the Spurs got kind of two good goals at the start, which kind of caught Chelsea flat-footed and caught Cucurella flat-footed especially. But I think Chelsea showed that they've got maybe not enough to win the league, but I think they've got a bit of credibility in the fact that they're going to be a decent force in the Premier League, and they're definitely now moving in the right direction. So I think for me that was kind of a big statement for them, because it was a big test to go away to Spurs, London derby, to close the gap on Liverpool, when the pressure's not really been on them, when no one's really been taking them too seriously for a Premier League title push. I don't think that will quite be the case this season for Chelsea, but I think they're starting to establish themselves again properly now as a top team in English football.
Cole Palmer with 2 goals, 2 penalties. One was a Panenka. Sean, your moment of the week.
I'm just gonna go with a little bit of a general moment here. If you're a fan of goals, the Champions League midweek, there was 4 matches that were 3-2. And there were some really, Barcelona, Dortmund, I thought was a very good match. Atalanta, Real Madrid. Listen, if those are the 2 teams, once again, they played in the Super Cup. If those are the last 2 teams standing in the Champions League final, I wouldn't be stunned. That was a fantastic game. Aston Villa, Leipzig was a fantastic game. Villa winning. But, I guess the biggest result was Juventus 2, Man City 0. Man City 1 win in 10. And, I would say Pep is pulling his hair out, but, he doesn't have any hair. So I don't know. I just – people, I think, questioned the Ballon d'Or. But now when you look at it, without Rodri, they stink. So maybe he is the best player in the world. I don't know. I thought they were terrible, and it's just they're a mess right now.
Yeah, they're definitely in a weird spot. It's one of those games where when you look at the statistics, right, Man City obviously had most of the ball, about 70%. The XG was very close. 2 big chances to 1. Shots were about equal. But I don't know. Did you ever really feel like they were in the game?
They didn't. You didn't know if they're going to score a goal. Look, they got Erling Haaland and all these players, and Jack Grealish hadn't scored in like 600 matches or something like this. But when you're watching these games, would you rather be, Man City right now, or an Arsenal, or a Dortmund and Barcelona, Barcelona who can score at will, Real Madrid who can get goals from everywhere. I just, Bayern, obviously, Bayern scores goals at will. I just, the fall off this season has been precipitous, and it just, I mean, they're bad to watch when they're good. They're boring. I mean, but look, they win. They move the ball.
It can be painful for sure.
They're painful to watch, but they win games. Now they're painful to watch and they're losing. I don't even know what I'd do if I was a fan of City at this point, because it's really bad to watch and they can't score goals and they can't stop them from going in.
Obviously, Dobbo, we know about the Man City injury record right now. Yesterday they had Ake, Bob, Rodri obviously out. Akanji, Foden, and Stones were all missing. The substitutes that they made were Savinho and Mateus Nunes. Where do you see them going? They've obviously been in a rut. What do you see? What do you think the way out is for them right now?
Buying in January, to be honest. I think they need someone in the middle of the park to not quite play to Rodri's level, but to deputise while he's out, because I think the profile, they've not got someone like him in the squad, which is their problem. Whereas everyone else in Man City's squad, bar Haaland, is replaceable, I think, in terms of not the quality, but they've got almost a like-for-like replacement.
Reasonable facsimile, right?
Yeah, whereas I think Rodri and Haaland are kind of like two staple players that they don't really have the same profile in the squad, and it's just almost irreplaceable. And obviously, yeah, I think it's also Pep Guardiola's brilliance will come out again, because we know that he's a top manager. We know that he finds problems to these solutions. They're in a rut, but it's Man City under Pep Guardiola with world-class players still. They're going to get out of it, and they're going to recover from it. So I think they'll sort it out, but I can see it going on for a little bit longer. And I don't quite think they'll reach the heights this season that they have over the last couple of seasons. But I don't think it's going to be a long-term thing. He's signed a new deal, Guardiola. They've still got top players at the club. They'll invest again. And I think that this season's probably just going to be a bit of an off-season for City. And then they'll go again. But I think for them at the moment, it's replacing that profile of Rodri in the transfer market is very key.
I think, too, for them, they got to play PSG next in the Champions League on match day 7. And if you look at the table right now, I mean, it's really, really tight. I mean, PSG is 25th, City 22nd, 23rd, 24th, obviously all on 8 points. So, if PSG wins that match, all of a sudden City could be outside that zone. I mean, look, they played Club Brugge on the last day, so, they could beat them and get back in. But I think, City's in a little bit of danger here of missing out on advancing. I don't think they will.
I mean, I think that even if they qualify, right, which obviously I think they're going to qualify, right? But the problem is that they get 2 more games, right? They have to play that round of 32 in February, which is certainly not helping their injury situation, right? Yeah, that's part of the fixture congestion problem that they're already having. So now they're certainly not qualifying in the top 8, which means that they're guaranteed to have these 2 extra games that they really can't afford. Like, we've already looked at the calendar on the show before, shameless plug, and we see that we're playing every team Champions League team that's still in the domestic cups in England is playing every 3 to 4 games until the international break in March. So they got to build the plane while they're flying. And I think it's going to be painful, continue to be painful. Obviously, they have the quality. I think underestimate them at your own peril, but they're certainly in a challenging time for this season. So for my moment of the week, there was a match that was played yesterday between teams that started the day at in the top 8 or the top 10 of the Champions League table, and that was Arsenal hosting Monaco. And my moment of the week is we might have been looking at the wrong Arsenal teenager. And that was Miles Lewis-Skelly putting on a wonderful performance at left back for injury-riddled Arsenal, who have a injured back 4 that is probably arguably the best in the world. That's the ones who can't play through injury. But they started a bit of a makeshift back 4, and I thought Miles Lewis-Skelly just looked magnificent. He seems like a Jurrien Timber light, right? He has all of the skills of the midfielder. Obviously, that's his background. If you're not an Arsenal fan, Miles Lewis-Skelly was raised as a 6-8. He is currently being played as a left back, a la Zinchenko, but he provides a dynamism in the way that he's able to get out of tight spaces, the way he's able to hold off a challenge, and the physicality of a tackler. And I mean, he just looked really wonderful. He had the pass that set up the first goal for Arsenal in a match that they had about 7,000 missed chances. Gabriel Jesus in on goal, one-on-one twice. And, you know, I think he played well overall, but his finishing is like the demonstration of where he is right now. So that was my moment of the week. Let's hop into it, boys. We have the Premier League table, and as of right now, we have Liverpool in first on 35 points. They, of course, had their game against Everton postponed last week due to inclement weather, followed by Chelsea, Arsenal, and Man City rounding out the top four. Then we move into Forest on 25 points. Forest, Villa, Brighton, Bournemouth, and Brentford, as well as Fulham in 10th, kind of all bunched up in that next class of teams. It'll be interesting as how that shakes out. Going into the bottom half of the table, we have Spurs on 20 points, along with Newcastle, Man United in 13th. How's that feeling, Sean? West Ham in 14th, Everton, Leicester, and Crystal Palace. And then in the drop zone, we have Ipswich, Wolves, and Southampton, as Crystal Palace got a big result against Man City last week, the draw at home, of course. Boys, so we look into let's just chat last week. Dobbo, you brought up the Spurs Chelsea game. Obviously, Spurs going full Spurs. And do you think Ange is going to get sacked? Put it right there.
I don't know. Is the honest answer. I think it could go either way. I think they're either gonna. I think it's either gonna happen quite quickly that he'll get sacked in the next kind of month or two, or they're gonna go all in and give him the backing a bit more and hope that it sticks. Because the problem is Spurs are just gonna get in a rut and in a rut and in a rut, almost like what Man United did. They've kind of taken a manager, thrown some money at it, thrown some money at the squad, but not really let a manager get a proper squad overhaul over several years, which is realistically what you need. And sometimes it doesn't work out, but I think for Tottenham, you can easily get into this rut that I think Chelsea went through a little bit. I think United are still going through it. I think Amorim is the right appointment, and I think if they back him, I think he'll get United going again. And I think Ange is a good manager, but I think that because of the way he plays, he's just very one-dimensional. I think that could be his downfall. He's not kind of got that ability to change. But I look at it as well in this current market. Who are Spurs going to get at the moment that would want to come to Spurs and take on that job? Because it's proven to be a tough role, these kind of rebuilds, and people are looking at Arsenal and saying, "Oh, look how good Arsenal's rebuild has been. I know we've got to win some trophies to fully complete it." But I think Arteta has set the benchmark for how you can rebuild a squad from the bottom up, and it's hard for teams to replicate that, and that is the bar, unfortunately.
Sean, as I look at the fixture schedule for Spurs, they go to Southampton, they host Man United in the League Cup, and then they host Liverpool. They go to Forest on Boxing Day, and then. Do you think he makes it to Christmas, past Christmas?
I mean, then you.
If you lose to Man U in the Cup, then you host Liverpool and get a nice drubbing. Like you could be eating Christmas dinner unemployed.
Forest away, Wolves who's scrapping and fighting for every result. I actually don't think Wolves have been that bad, even though they keep losing. I mean, they score.
They
goals.
just concede too much, right? But that's the thing against Spurs. The back door is wide open.
Newcastle away on the 4th, Arsenal away on the 15th of January, Everton away on the 19th of January, Brentford away on the 2nd of January, then United again. I think you have to decide. When when Amorim came in, everyone's like, oh yeah, he's not getting results. Look, our squad stinks. Everybody knows it. Like the realistic people know it. It's going to be a while. You basically just have to be there, making sure that you're kind of going in a positive direction when City falls off, when Liverpool's getting old. Look, if they want to sign Mo Salah again and Van Dijk and all this stuff, that's great, but they're getting old and all of a sudden they're going to be terrible. So, you have to decide, look, is this the guy that we want to stick with and rebuild, or do we want to kind of, go again and try to find some, I don't know who you're going to get. What are you going to get? Graham Potter, Gareth South. Like, who are you going to get? That's the other issue. Once again, Dobbo said that. But I think at some point, it was like with Ten Hag, it's untenable. You can't just keep losing and playing terrible football. They're playing Rangers right now, and it's 0-0 early in the game. Southampton away. Once again, Southampton's, they've been a little bit unlucky. They haven't been the worst team of, they're losing matches, but look, they're scoring goals, and the games have been tough. Liverpool's obviously a brutal game. Manchester United in the cup. Tottenham has to decide, look, are we going to try to go for a trophy here? Are we going to try to kind of stabilize everything? Because with the squad they have, obviously they're in the Europa League. I think maybe they could go for that as well. But Force, I don't know, if you lose, if you get a draw at Southampton, if you lose to United, if you lose to Liverpool, Boxing Day, you go to Nottingham Forest, you get a draw or something like this. I think at some point they could say, look, it's just not working, and get a little balance. But once again, who are you appointing that's going to come in and do this? And if they don't spend any money, what's the difference?
Yeah, for sure. It's an interesting dynamic there. The same issues that have plagued him for a while continue to plague him, which is the set pieces, the defensive stability. They're asking these players to cover big spaces, and ultimately, as science says, when you do repeated sprints, like, you have a higher likelihood of muscle injuries, right? That's just like, nobody can argue that. Right? It's just what happens.
Science.
Yeah, exactly. So it's definitely put them in a precarious position. It'll be interesting, I think. It's also interesting. I know that there have been some frustrations in the Spurs camp about, or with Spurs fans, about how much they've been playing their youngsters, obviously in the cup. So, but then you have also, you have this need you got to go win a trophy, right? If you're them. So how do you balance playing the youth with trying to win a trophy? If obviously it's pretty clear that the manager doesn't quite think that the youth players are at the level, otherwise he would be playing them more, right? If you look at Arteta, he started Lewis-Skelly in the Champions League yesterday. He's been giving Nwaneri 10, 15, 20 minutes here and there. He hasn't been afraid to play these players, which demonstrates his faith in them. Do you think, I don't want to spend too much time on Spurs, Dobbo, but kind of last thoughts on how the youth aspect plays into it, and obviously them having these players who are promising but maybe not quite there.
Yeah, well, I think there's a couple of things that play into it, because I think it's one of those that if you're good enough, you're old enough. But at the same time, these young players, you do have to protect them and you do have to integrate them properly. And the best way to do that is when you've got good squad harmony, you've got a good squad, and you've got the squad that you can actually integrate the youth into. So if you put them in and they make a mistake, you've got that kind of measured heads in the squad, and you've got the team around them and the system around them that'll actually protect those youth players. And we've seen it before, that youth players, they come in, they don't have the best run of games, especially with social media nowadays. They get hounded. And these young players, they've grown up on social media. I know it seems trivial, but it's a big thing. It plays on their minds. But I think another thing as well is you can see that he doesn't really trust the youth, because when you looked at the last game that they played against Chelsea, I think it's another indicator as well that Ange is really under pressure, is the fact that he rushed back Van de Ven and Romero from injury. Yep. And it means that he doesn't trust the players, whether that's a youth player or anybody else in the squad. He just doesn't trust the rest of the squad, that he wanted to rush those players in. And if anything, it's had a negative effect because they're now both injured again. But yeah, I think just wrapping up on Tottenham, I think it's one of those that if they're good enough, I think they would have chances in the squad. But it's clearly that either they're not good enough or they are good enough, but Ange just doesn't have the solution to get them in the team in a stable environment at the moment.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's hard when you don't have that stability, particularly defensive stability.
You there?
I'm here, but maybe I wasn't there for you. As we shift into match week 16, I know we only have you for a few more minutes, Dobbo. Let's look at the obvious fixture. We have the Manchester Derby. And, I think typically in the past few years, it has been dominated by Manchester City, obviously, with Man United making appearances here and there. In this moment, this Man City, obviously Man United is coming into a new management, a new phase with Amorim. Do you think that this is Man United's best chance at a win in quite some time?
I think yes, but also it's so early in Amorim's days that he still hasn't had enough time to really project what he wants to do, even in the most simplest of forms. Obviously, he can set up his team and he can get the real basics across early doors, but you need more time to really get across what you want. But at the same time, City are vulnerable. It's a big game. And I think for both these clubs, I think this could be a real turning point in the season. It could be City turn up, get a great result against United, and that kind of kickstarts them again and gets them going again because they've got the quality to do it if they want to turn up and Guardiola get a system that gets the players going. But at the same time, if Amorim can find a system and a way to get a win away to City, further dampen City's spirits and the way that they've been playing, that'll be a big boost to Man United. And it's one of those things that these big results really help players buy into your methods and buy into what you're trying to create in terms of a culture. I know it was a while in the past, but I look back to Arteta and players really bought in because he came in, there was no nonsense. He won the FA Cup in the first season because he got the basic foundations right from the get-go. He kind of made a really simple system that catered to the players that he had at the time until he could rebuild that squad. And because of that, the players bought in, the culture improved. And then obviously Arsenal since then have gone on an upward trajectory. I think for United, that could be it could be the same thing here. But again, for Man City, vice versa, they're in a rut. This is the best time to get out of a rut. A derby win, a good performance. It really would get the confidence going. And elite sport, a lot of it at the top level is about confidence. It's about building that momentum and that confidence. And if you can get that going, then it's going to be a big boost. So for whoever comes out on top, I think it could be almost a season-defining moment early on. You're on mute.
Sean, you are unmuted.
We also
was muted.
Yes, we won the Battle of the Balls last year in the FA Cup final as well. So
That's true. You guys did have the FA Cup final win. It obviously under a different manager in a different system. Do you, from your perspective, how do you see this one playing out?
I mean, far be it from me to be the voice of rational Manchester United fans on, X and social media and stuff like this, but the people are very, very like, oh, yes, he's Amorim, but he's got to get it right. All this. Look, our players stink, man. If you watch the game today, as soon as Rashford came off, as soon as they brought, Mount on and Anthony on, and Højlund had 2 goals and should have had about 5 if they would have passed it to him in the final couple minutes. They looked a lot better. So he's still trying to figure out what our best lineup is. And I, as someone who grew up in America, I am kind of basically likening this to a tryout. This is basically a tryout right now. He's throwing these people out there, and if you'll see, it's different lineups every time, and it's different players. He's starting to figure out what the best back 4 is and who his best players are in certain positions. So he's figuring that out, and he's changing the stuff around. And he says, "Who can step? We're playing Manchester City. Who's going to step up in a big match right here?" And he's gonna throw out Hoyland, and he's going to throw maybe he started Xerxes today, and maybe he'll Ahmad is kind of locked that stuff down. Mizraoui, he's starting to find these guys, and who's going to play well. And these guys aren't going to be ready to play, some of them, because they're not good enough. Probably 50% of the squad is not good enough. And he's going at halftime, he's like, look, you know what? You guys aren't good enough. I'm taking you off. I'm putting somebody on, and he's making some of these changes, and he's going to see the next person up. So, look, I always want to beat City, and it's always, it would be great to kind of drive the nail in, and then, but look, at this point now, it's just about trying to make sure we have the right thing going forward and getting into January. And Dobbo, I know you got to leave, so let you kind of talk and get you the last word in there.
Dobbo, so quick question. We have a lot of players for Man United, there's going to be a lot of players who are going to be making their departures. There's probably going to be a high turnover in the next year. One of those players who has been recently reported as being available is one Marcus Rashford. Is he somebody that interests you as an Arsenal fan here in January?
Yes, take him.
Not anymore. No. If you had asked me a season maybe ago and then a couple of seasons ago, yeah, I probably would have. But I think the sample size is just getting too large to take that risk on. And I'm sorry, Arsenal, we don't need another Save Me project. We don't need that. Although I think that Rashford is one of these players with bags of talent, and I think he still has bags of talent. I just don't think there's just something not clicking. And the problem is, if you can't find out what isn't clicking and get him clicking very, very quickly, that's a big money signing still to get him away from United. It's a big contract because he'll want a big contract going into the kind of the prime / latter stages of his career. Not for me. I think Arsenal need to go in the market. They need to be brutal, and they need to buy players that are going to hit the ground running and fit in the system, because that is where Arsenal are at. They need those real level raisers now, not the floor raisers. They need the ceiling raisers and the level raisers. So for me, Marcus Rashford is a no. I think that there are other moves in other clubs that I think would suit him a bit more. I think leaving the Premier League, I think, would actually suit him a little bit more, and going to Europe, maybe to Germany or France or even Spain, I think, where the football and the style might suit his kind of technical ability a bit more, that kind of raw threat on the transition, where he's just not getting that in the Premier League. People have sussed him out and it's just not working. I think he needs a real fresh reset, and to go and play a bit of football and to kind of get that back, but not for Arsenal.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, at the wages he's at, even if he takes a pay cut, let's say he's willing to take an incentive laden deal at whatever, let's call it $200,000 to $250,000 a week, right? Hypothetically, the amount of teams that can pay a 30 to $40 million transfer fee and then pay a player upwards of $200,000 a week, the list of that team is pretty small. So it certainly limits where he can end up. Perhaps a Bayern, as Sané is going to be out of contract. What was that?
PSG. He's nailed on for PSG. Like he's got PSG players written all over him. He's 100% going to PSG.
Yeah, that's one that definitely fits in. Dobbo, it was great to see you, buddy. Thanks for hopping on. Hopefully we can have you back soon.
You, Dobbo.
And if we don't talk to you until then, happy holidays, buddy.
Yeah, you too. Thanks, guys. See you later.
Cheers. Yeah, I mean, it does smell like a PSG move.
He's got, I have to be careful what I say here. He started playing when he was 18. And he was very good when he came on the scene. He was very good in the academy. But, look, he came in every time he came in, first match, in every competition he scored. He scored in the midweek against Midtjylland, and then he scored against Arsenal, and then he scored for England, and he scored this stuff. But he's got a lot of mileage on his body. I think I think he played hurt a lot over, from 2020 to 2024. He had back injuries, ankle injuries. I think that they rushed him back. That didn't help. I think, his body's breaking down. I think some of the off the field issues is a big thing. The best thing I think for him would just to kind of like I would say get out of this league, go somewhere else. I think he would be, France, Germany, something like this. I mean, he could go over there and dominate. He could score goals. I mean, definitely. But I mean, you just saw him today. I mean, he's just lost. But look, I mean, once again, this, I wouldn't be stunned if he doesn't play. This game, I mean, I 100% think it's bigger for City. They're a disaster right now. I mean, if you go in this game and don't beat this Manchester United team right now, it's absolutely, 1 win in 11. They're out of the title race, and I also don't think. Who are they going to sign? Like, if you're somebody going there, hey, all these guys are on big salaries. So like people are going there and they're making these big, but like, are you, if you're a big player, are you thinking about signing there right now in the middle of all this stuff with the uncertainty with them? I just don't know. I think they're in a little bit of limbo here until they figure out what's going on with the 100 and, it's 130 charges now. So, pretty soon they'll be pinning, P. Diddy stuff on him as well. It'll be 200 charges. They'll be rolling up P. Diddy charges into City. Some of the charges are, it's whatever. But I just don't think they're just in a tough spot because until they know what's going to happen. Look, if they're in the championship or they're in, League Two, which, I don't know what's going to happen, but why you're not going there? They're going to lose the players. They're going to go the other way. So I think they're just in a bad spot right now. So if you're Manchester United, I would want to play them right now.
Yeah, it's definitely a weird time. Ultimately, I think money talks, and that's what we see for any of these players. When you have the opportunity to go and make life-changing money on a guaranteed contract for your family, you go do it, and you figure out the rest later, right? And if they're going to offer you $200,000, $300,000 a week, then you figure it out. And maybe your agent negotiates some sort of break clause if they get relegated or something like that. You figure it out.
You're going to show the schedule right here for Matchweek 16. And I know you're in a weird time zone there. Why? All of a sudden, why are there no 12:30 kickoffs? Like it's 7:30 in the morning here on Saturdays for me. Here we are this weekend. There's no early morning match here. In a couple weeks, on the match day during on Sunday, there's no early kickoffs. The first one or the second week in January, there's no early kickoffs. I don't understand why they're doing this. I know there's 3 windows on Sunday this weekend. But they keep changing the schedule around. It's driving me nuts. I wake up in the morning.
I think it has to do with the Champions League because of the way that the Champions League games are. The Champions League teams are mixed in. I think, and then like there's so many variables that we don't always think about, right? In terms of like the London teams with the policing and how the Metropolitan Police have rules around how many teams can play at the same time at different. So I think a lot of those like other little variables, because if you look at the teams that are playing in Europe, very few of them are playing each other, which is usually when you can get those early games. So I think that has a lot to do with it. I mean, next week when I look forward, there's a early game.
Yeah, Villa City, and then they put the best match in the weekend in the early window.
Yeah, for sure. And then it's Man City play Everton. So I'm not complaining because it means that I get to watch more football at times. That's reasonable, but I definitely, it's part of like the day of football starting, 12:30 in UK and being able to go throughout the rest of the day. So I know you like to look at your little window. We have Liverpool, Fulham, Newcastle, Leicester, in kind of your favorite window. Are you going to be tuning in to watch Rude Boys take on the Stripes at St. James's Park, or will it be the Arsenal boys taking on Liverpool at Anfield?
I think Liverpool Fulham is a little bit is a tricky game for Liverpool. I think Fulham's been actually pretty good in and out. I mean, they're pretty tough to play. Liverpool obviously at home, and they had the midweek match, so I think that's going to be interesting. I'm looking at 2. Arsenal, Everton, I'll probably be, I would expect Arsenal to win that pretty easily. Newcastle, Leicester, and Wolves, Ipswich. Wolves, Ipswich, when you look up the definition of a 6-pointer, that's it. Both of these teams, I think, at times have been pretty good. You look at Wolves, they've scored 23 goals. That's more than Newcastle and Manchester United and West Ham. I mean, basically,
it's more than Fulham.
More than Fulham. They should be the 23 goals they've scored should have them towards the top of the table. They've given up 38. That's a disaster. They have minus 15 goal difference. They only have they don't get a lot of draws. They either win or they lose. Ipswich Town, I think, you look at them, they've been super unlucky. Last weekend, my friend Mike Sampson, who's a Leicester fan, was saying, look, Leicester's losing that game 2-0 and comes back and scores 2 goals late and draws and gets a point there. And Ipswich is winning 1-0, in the 85th minute and loses. And he's just like, look, that's the difference between a team that's going to stay up by a point and go down by a point, which is 100% true. I mean, that point could be huge. Leicester to me looks like a decent team. Rude's going to have them, I think turn them around. The early new manager bounce, but if you watch them play, I mean, they're good enough to stay up, especially with Southampton and some of these other teams. Newcastle, look, I mean, they're not Manchester United. Nobody cares about Newcastle. They try to be, I know they're owned by the big, Saudis, and they're trying to make a rivalry with Manchester United when there really isn't one. Look, we beat them in the Carabao Cup final and all this stuff. Well, they've spent some money. They have some good players. When are we going to start talking about Eddie Howe? They've won 5 of 15 matches this year, which isn't a small sample size at this point. They played 15 Premier League matches. They have 5 wins. They play Brentford on Wednesday in the Carabao Cup, so they have a chance to keep going there, but that Brentford match will be tough. I wouldn't favor them with Arsenal, Tottenham, Manchester United, and Liverpool in the tournament as well. Newcastle's probably not going to win it. At what point do we start saying this is a little bit of a crisis here for Newcastle? And I know, Isak, they're already talking about him leaving. If this project doesn't work, if they don't make it back to the Champions League, and remember, look, they were a Champions League team. They made a Carabao Cup final. They lost to Manchester United. They made the Champions League that year, which is what they're building. And then all of a sudden they drop out in the group stage, and then they get knocked out of Europe because Manchester United beats City in the FA Cup. And all of a sudden last year is a disaster. And we talked about this on the league show that we did. This is a huge year for Newcastle. And you look up after 15 matches, they have 5 wins from 15, minus 2 goal difference, and they're sitting in 12th.
And they're not playing in Europe.
They're not playing in Europe. And, they're 7 points ahead of Crystal Palace, who's been terrible. West Ham United, who's been terrible, could pass them this weekend. I think they're a mess. And if I was Leicester, I would want to play them right now because Leicester's got some momentum and, Rude. And I think they could get something from this match. So, that window is really, really intriguing. Arsenal and Everton, I know I've been to Arsenal against Everton at Everton. And, I know Everton plays them tough all the time. I think Sean Dice is probably going to be gone at some point. But, Arsenal, I think, probably wins that game pretty easily. Liverpool probably wins. And then, of course, you got the 12:30 match, which I think is really interesting as well.
Yeah, just touching on Newcastle, their results have been so – like they won 3 in a row. They had the game against Chelsea in the Cup. they beat Arsenal, and they beat Forest. And then they go and they lose to West Ham. They draw 2 in a row against Palace, a tough draw against Liverpool, but a game in which they led, I believe, like 3 different times. So that's got to be frustrating. And then you go and you get kind of walloped by Brentford. The inconsistency is what I think, if I was a Newcastle fan, I would be really frustrated, because you see signs of life and then they just it doesn't feel like they can ever really build momentum. And
they got tough games coming up. I mean, look, you got to go to Ipswich. Ipswich is a tough place to play. That place is really tough to play. Ipswich is actually really good. They've been good at home. And then on Boxing Day, you got Aston Villa, who's been, obviously in the Champions League have been phenomenal. John Duran has been great. And then, you got a game at Manchester United on the 30th. And then you got at Spurs on the 4th. I mean, there's never a break. I just don't know. I think if Eddie Howe struggles in this period, if they go out of the Carabao Cup and they don't win a few of these games, I think that's the next job maybe that could come open that somebody is going to be really targeting, because once again, I mean, they have money to spend in theory. Obviously, they're struggling with some of this PSR stuff, but maybe. But I don't know. I mean, I look at them and I'm not impressed. Tonali wants to leave. He comes in, they stick with him. And now he's playing. He's like, I don't want to sit behind Sean Longstaff, which I don't blame him. And he wants to go back to Italy, or he wants to go somewhere else. So I think they're a mess, and I think they're this close because, if Isak goes to Arsenal, and why wouldn't you want to at this point? If you're Isak, goes to Arsenal, and they, Guimaraes goes to City, and they start ripping the team apart, you don't know whether or not they're going to be able to get good players to come back in. So it's interesting.
Yeah. The Tonali, the Italian tale as old as time. The Italian player comes in and wants to leave after a year. Playing time or weather related. I appreciate both of those 100%.
Hey, I can live in Newcastle for this amount of money per. Oh wait, the sun never shines here, and it's dark at 3:00 every day. In the wintertime, it gets dark.
And then you're not playing
in the afternoon, and you're not playing. You're sitting behind Sean Long. You walk out of your house at 8:00 in the morning. It's dark. And you go do some shopping at the mall. Hey, all of a sudden you're at the mall for 6 hours. You walk out at 3:00 and it's dark again. You're like, what the hell, man? It's brutal, and the weather sucks. And you're not playing. Hey, at least you're getting paid.
Yeah, it stacks up though. You know what I mean? And when you have the opportunity to go ply your trade in a similar situation in a different place, it's definitely 100%. I can see the appeal of that. Newcastle definitely, they have some big matches coming up. I mean, the Brentford one is no gimme. They just got throttled by Brentford. They go and play Brentford in the cup. Thomas Frank, in my opinion, one of the most underrated managers in the league. He's going to want to progress and try to get them to the next phase of that competition for their team. So, like you said, you go to Ipswich, you have Villa, Man United, Spurs, every fixture in the Premier League is tough, and that's part of why we do this podcast, because it is competitive every week, and any of the other 19 teams can beat you, but you got that. It's going to be a tough run for them, and God forbid one of those guys, one of their better players gets injured, and then you throw in another wrench in this situation, and it could be lights out for Mr. Howe. Speaking of Newcastle, obviously you had Dan Ashworth leaving Man United, your club, after a pretty short period of time in charge as a sporting director there. It seemed like there was some disagreement in the boardroom around managers and player selection. And from a fan's perspective, what's your take on them bringing him in, waiting all that time to bring him in from Newcastle, and then to see him out in a pretty quick fashion.
So the stuff that came out, it's how, he's backing Gareth Southgate, and, he wanted Eddie Howe, or like one of these English guy, Graham Potter, and, the rest of the people were like, no, we want Amorim, and, we want good players, and not like, it doesn't have to be English. We don't want Raheem Sterling. I kind of liken this to Manchester United's been an absolute disaster for a long time. Even when Fergie was there, he was papering over the cracks for a long time. They were this close. They were an offside goal in 2010 and an injury time winner from City in 2012. You talk about, 4 in a row. They were this close to 7 in a row. They've goal difference and 1 point to win 7 titles in a row. And that was already after the Glazers had started kind of doing this stuff. And people will say, look, they spent a lot of money. Yes, they have a lot of misplaced money. People are killing them because, they're getting rid of all these people that work there and all these things. Look, here's the way I put it. If you and there's so many different problems. The house is rotting all over the place. You got to just you got to like just gut it, right? If you're in, say you start dating someone and there's a couple, hey, yeah, it's great, early, it's honeymoon period, right? And there's a couple, early red flags. Oh, this guy wants Gareth Southgate, and look, Southgate is whatever, but if you watch the football, it's anti-football, right? With all that talent England has, they still can't win anything. And Raheem Sterling and the English people, like whatever. There's these red flags. Do you try to stick with it and say it's going to change? And I can change this person. I'm going to be the one to change this person. Or do you know what? You're like, listen, there's so many. I have so many problems in my life. My roof is leaking. My car. Every time I start my car, it's leaking oil. I gotta fix. I gotta fix my car. My dog is sick. I got this. Do you try to stick with it, just hope it gets better, or you just say, listen, it's like just too much. Let's just cut ties and just go from there. And I think, that's what Radcliffe decided to do. Listen, it's not working. Instead of trying to make it work, no hard feelings, just go. And, like they have all these other guys they hired, Wilcox and, Vivel, and they got enough people. So for me, people are like, oh, it's a disaster. For me, it's almost like I think the Glazers would have stuck with it for forever. He also backed Ten Hag, and he wanted Ten Hag to come back when everyone else kind of didn't want him to come back. But instead of sticking with them and say, hey, I'm going to admit I made a mistake and just go. And I think that's almost more important. Why waste more money? And why just admit you made a mistake and go. There's so many things that have to be fixed. It's almost like to me, I'm like, man, this team is maturing. Manchester United's growing up. They actually made a good decision. They're maturing. That's an adult decision. It's not working. This is an adult decision. He has to go. No hard feelings. So that's who I think. Other people are going crazy about it. So I see both sides of it. But just for me, if you kind of use that analogy, I think it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, so if you've ever been in the world of startups, what they say is fail fast. And
yep.
I think in the world of football, it can be challenging to fail fast because you have longer contracts. You don't have the ability to just fire somebody and be off with it. But in the land of executives, you kind of do, right? You pay their fee and then they go off and,
You're gone.
and
Yep.
they get a new job and then you don't have to pay them anymore. So I think in that aspect of things, if they felt like it wasn't a good fit, then yeah, get rid of them and it's all good. What's intriguing to me and something that I read somewhere was in reference to Ashworth wanting Southgate was about kind of like stabilizing the ship, right? And when you have a house, like you said, that's in so much disorder, right? You have to triage the situation and you have to do harm reduction, right? So if you have a bad foundation and your roof is leaking and you have rotting wood, right? One begets another, right? And so you got to patch up the roof so that you don't have any more water leaking, so that you can slow down the rot and keep the foundation from crumbling. And I think that in a lot of ways that Southgate was that patch, right? Who could buy you some time with a steady hand, with somebody who honestly can go out and take a beating in the media. Like Gareth Southgate has shown, he'll show up to those press conferences and say whatever needs to be said to get it through to the next moment. He has shown some ability to get the teams at least into the later stages of competitions, even against his own best efforts, you might say, right? But he's done it. So what can you, like, there's got to be something to be said for having done it. So I could see while I don't think that Southgate is by any stretch the long-term fix for Man United, I think if I'm looking at it from like, how can I give Dan Ashworth the most credit? And you know what I mean? If I'm looking from that position, it's okay. I'm going to bring in a manager who I can eat poop for 2 or 3 years. It's going to buy me time to turn over the roster and get in a good set of players. Maybe he can start performing at a decent level in the interim, and then I could go out and grab a coach who's going to take us to the next level, right? And I think that was kind of the idea. My concern is that with Amorim and bringing in Amorim is that you end up having to fire him because the team is not good, even though he's the right coach for your long-term project, right? And that would be, if I was Dan Ashworth, I'd be like, yes, Amorim is the coach that we want to move us forward. But if we bring him in today, we're going to basically wheel him in here from Portugal and then take a bat and break his knees, and then we're going to be like, why aren't you walking? You know, and I that's kind of the vibe that from when I'm looking at it as best as I can from the outside is like, we're going to bring in this coach with a terrible squad. As you've said, he's going to get bad results. The fans are going to be mad because it's not working right away, when this is not a right away project. It's we need to turn over 75% of this roster project. You know, does that make sense?
Yeah, 100%. I can see both sides of it. I think, you know, and it goes back to kind of what I was saying before, the tryout. I think Amorim and the higher ups, you know, look, people are saying, you know, there was a report today that from the Daily Mail that said like, oh, Amorim doesn't know the job he like the depth of the job he has to look. He played with Victor Lindelof at Benfica. I'm sure he's been watching Manchester United at some point over the last 5 years. If he's watched Victor Lindelof and, you know, these Luke Shaw be out for 6 months, come back, play in the final, and then be injured, you know, for the rest of the season when we're paying all this, I think he knows the depth that we're in and, you know, the struggles and all this. He knows it. I think he knows, what's coming through because we have some talented players coming through. He knows there's a base, there's some players there, and you know when the other ones go, the high earners that are kind of like they're almost like cancers in the clubhouse. I mean, they're not that they're bad people or whatever, but it's just they're earning a lot of money and they're not getting a lot of, you know, they're not producing and stuff like that. I think for, you know, when he gets rid of those people, and I think everyone is so pessimistic. I actually think they're going to be flying like in the Europa League. You know, if they get a player, if they can sell a couple of these guys and get a couple players in January, I think they're going to be flying in like February, March, April, because they're going to finally get it. He's going to be playing with his people. You know, the players that he wants to play. But you know,
and at this point, it looks like Man U are going to avoid the round of 32, right? So they'll have a little bit of a breather.
Look, you know, they play FCSB. You know, I thought that was UC Santa Barbara for a second. UCSB there, and you know, Rangers at home. They're going to finish in the top 8, I think. You know, they'll win. You know, they'll win one of those. They could win 2 of those, and that's going to help. And I think they're going to be flying at some point. He's going to get, you know, a player or 2 in January, and they're going to get rid of some of these guys that are causing issues. You know, and then in the summer they'll get rid of some more of them, and you see the reports, and they won't sign some people back, and they'll think, but it's just right now it's weird to say going forward, but there's not really a lot of pressure on him, especially for this weekend. Pep has all the pressure in the world. If I was Manchester City right now, every time I step on the pitch, I'm like, my head's gonna explode. Like, there's so much pressure on it. Besides the fact nobody cares about Manchester City outside of whatever, even they're not Arsenal, they're not Manchester United, they're not Chelsea, whatever. They can win as many titles as they want, but they're never going to be as big as these other teams. But they have all this pressure to go out there and do this stuff. You could see Pep is like going through it right now, I still think Liverpool's going to go through a stretch here. They've been so good for so long. I think they're a Mo Salah injury away. If he misses a month, I think they're in a little bit of trouble, or Van Dijk, something like that. Arsenal's obviously not out of it. Chelsea's been way better than anybody thought. Maresca's done a good job. It's all very interesting. As a Manchester United fan, I just want to watch. Like today, I was just like, look, I don't care how you win the game, just win the game. If it's the ugliest win in the world, it doesn't matter. You just got to win and get through to that, and they did that. Just kind of. I know it's going to get better. I think it's almost a little bit like Arsenal was under Arteta, that first couple years.
You just got to go through this. You just got to go through the pain, and you just got to know it.
You got to get. You're basically turning over the entire squad except for two or three players, and if this is the right guy, which it looks like he is, because Sporting, basically since he left Sporting, every single player in the squad is like, I want out. They're, they lost 4 in a row. They're throwing like fireworks at, Jokeris, who, they just won 2 of the last. They broke the Benfica and Porto reign for 20 years. He won 2 titles in 4 years. They haven't won since he left. So, clearly I think he's a pretty good coach. So they just got to stick with it. But, once again, as a fan of the Premier League, I always, I talk about those 10 o'clock window. I like watching a lot of the other games too, and I think there's going to be some good games this weekend.
Yeah, notes on the bringing it back to the Wolves Ipswich one. Wolves are 10th on goals scored, and they are last in goals against, and they're last in goals against by 7. The team in 19th has conceded 7 fewer goals than them, which is so bad. There's the Forest Villa game, which I think is an interesting one. Villa are they're kind of going full Unai. Obviously, they picked up the win last week against Southampton, but they are in danger of falling in. You there? You qualify for the Champions League. You perform well in the Champions League, but your league form dips as a result of that. They play that's 5th and 6th playing against each other. I think if Villa want to stay on the pace that they need to be on to qualify for Champions League, they definitely need to get a result this week, even though it's away. Forest, obviously, the City Ground, a hard place to go to. Forest have been playing really well. It's going to be a tough one.
I think Villa's got to tread water right now. They're in the middle of this, and look, that win during the week was massive in the Champions League, because they're through. It's just a matter of whether or not now they're going to get that bye. And have to spare those 2 matches, which would be massive for them in February to be able to just concentrate on the league, and maybe an FA Cup, something like that. But
their last match is against Celtic, but they also have to go to Monaco, and their next match is going to Monaco, and then after that, in the last match day, they host Celtic. So you would imagine that they'll be able to get the 3 in the last match day, but that trip to Monaco is definitely going to be tough.
Yeah, and the Champions League, look, from 3rd to Arsenal right now is in 3rd, maybe by alphabetical order. but 3rd to 12th is separated by 1 point. 3rd to 14th is separated by 2 points. 13th and 14th, Atalanta and Juventus, both on 11. But, there's a bunch of teams with 13 points. There's a bunch of teams with 12 points. So,
and sorry, last thing of note, it's just important note for Aston Villa and Unai Emery. Before that trip to Monaco, they play Arsenal in the league. So
yes.
3 days before. So that's not one that Unai can rotate his way out of. And it's at the Emirates. So it's Arsenal, Monaco, West Ham, Celtic. So it's going to be a pretty tough, tougher than you think. Yeah,
I think they have to tread water in the in the Premier League and just try to focus. See what you can do, and then obviously get Champions League. Because you got a chance. Any English team I think in the Champions League has a chance because you're better than a lot of these other teams that are going to qualify. But look, if Aston Villa can get through the first, the FA Cup, a month from now, that first FA Cup weekend, and be sitting somewhere, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th. Right now, once again, 5th through 10th is separated by 2 points. 5th through 9th, 5th through 8th is separated by 1 point. If you're in that mix right there from 5th to 9th, and you're within a couple points of 4th or something like this. And remember, 5th place could be Champions League next year as well. I think they're going to be in good shape. They'll that owner will sign some players. They're a pretty good team. Duran's phenomenal. So but if they go in the tank of it, although, it seems like they've already kind of gone in the tank and maybe stabilized a little bit. They stabilized the ship a little bit. They're starting to sink.
Yeah,
and then
for
all
sure.
of a
They
sudden,
definitely came out of that.
Stabilized the ship now, 3 wins in a row in all competitions. You're like, all right, now we're a little bit stable. They still have a 0 goal difference, which is a little bit shaky. But hey, maybe they already stabilized it and they're going to start to kind of build on that. So you never know with that.
Yeah, it's hard. It's hard to say. I agree with you in terms of them keeping close enough for touching distance and then being able to make a push later in the season. It's interesting of their next few fixtures. They go to Forest, they host Man City, they go to St. James's Park, and then they have Brighton, and that rounds out the year for them.
Oh, Rangers goal, right out of half. Rangers 1-0 over Tottenham. For all you Tottenham haters, Rangers come out of halftime and take the lead 1-0. That Ange. We talked about this at the beginning of the show. We're gonna maybe close with it. Now he's in a little bit of trouble. If you go up to Rangers who aren't that good and lose, now you're in a little bit of trouble. Now I think.
And yeah, for sure. Ange could definitely find himself in a little bit of heat. And when you again, I think when you talk about the long-term outlook for a team like Aston Villa, right? And you talk about them, okay, let's keep close and then let's push on through the end of the year. I think that's certainly a reasonable assumption. They have the way that their season ends is pretty tough. Their last matches going backwards are Man U, Spurs, Bournemouth, Fulham, Man City, Newcastle. So that's their last set of matches. And then it seems like they'll probably qualify for the top 8 and miss that round of 16. Miss that round of 32. The round of 16 fixtures are going to fall between Brentford, Liverpool, and Brighton. So, it's going to be tough, I think, when they obviously are out of the League Cup, which puts them in a good position with fewer fixtures, but it's not going to be easy.
Their key stretch is January 26th. They play West Ham at home. February 1st, they're Wolves away. Obviously a rivalry match. Saturday, February 15th, Ipswich at home. Huge stretch for them there right in the middle. Now, remember, if they qualify for the top 8, they're not going to be playing in the Champions League,
right
after that. So they can kind of, that's when they're going to be able to start to make a little bit of run. Chelsea at home, obviously is a tough game, but, they got them at home. Crystal Palace away, they have some games that they could win there. Brentford
definitely accumulate some points in there.
get some points up, and then
for
you
sure.
kind of, all of a sudden when you start to play the Champions again, then you got Liverpool, you got some of these other games. But if you can get, win some matches there, all of a sudden now maybe you go into, the Champions League round of 16 and that match with Liverpool after the international break with, with a little bit of confidence and getting some players back, and you're rolling a little bit. So, yeah, it's interesting because, I know you know a little bit more about Unai than I do. So you never know with him. I mean, they
never go full Unai. That's
never go full Unai.
The moral of it. But there's obviously a lot of football left to be played, even just before the end of the year. We have the festive fixture schedule, which is sure to be very entertaining. Thanks for hopping on with me today, Sean. It was great to see you. And let's chat next week after what I am certain is going to be another good round of fixtures. So I'll talk to you soon, buddy. Thank you.
That's right. See you.